Welcome to this episode of Truth Seekers, where His Grace Bishop Emilianos of Meloa will answer questions sent in by the youth with a member of the youth.
Hello again, Vanessa. I've got another question for you.
Okay, let's do it.
What strategies can we use to pique the interest of our non-Orthodox friends so that they might experience the beauty of our church for themselves?
That's a really good question. I think when I was around 17, 18, in my late teens, and I became very, I'll use the word zealous about my faith, this question felt like a burning question for me. How can I share my faith? How can I bring other people to know the truth of Orthodoxy, to know the fullness of the faith? And I'm in a very different place now in my life spiritually, where I don't have that burning need, because I've learned that we have more impact when we actually focus more so on our own spiritual growth. That's where people really come to know Christ in our life. And at the time, I would think about it in this light of strategies, like how can I have like a game plan to bring the faith to other people? And it was a very methodical way of thinking, and it lacked a lot of the heart that I think Orthodoxy has, in that we don't want to, Orthodox Christians, even missionaries, Orthodox missionaries that go overseas to do work, that their goal isn't to convert people. Their goal is to love like Christ did and to be Christ to the people around them. And by being Christ to the people around them, some people actually become Christians because they find that truth. But the goal, I don't think, is to try and convert. We're not trying to like hit a quota system of we can bring this many people in. So I had a really big shift in my mentality as I started to mature a bit with my own faith. In terms of strategies, I mean, perhaps you actually have ideas of what strategies may be, but I find things like inviting non-Christians or non-Orthodox people to church, or trying to get them to come to Bible studies, or doing stuff like that, I think that doesn't work. I think it turns people off. If you are a non-Orthodox person, or you're someone who's maybe was baptized Orthodox but never goes to church, it's a very intense, of course it is, it's encountering Christ. It's a very intense experience to be an Orthodox Christian. It's your whole way of life. Even walking into an Orthodox church can feel so alienating if you are not an Orthodox Christian, because an Orthodox church is unlike any other building you will walk into. Everything about it is different. It doesn't even resemble other denominations, their churches. And to try and throw somebody in the deep end who is not an Orthodox Christian and force them to go into that environment when they themselves are not prepared, or they have not themselves gone through a journey of trying to discover their faith, that can be a really alienating and almost like repelling experience. And I think it's dangerous to try and drag people through the church doors who are not Orthodox Christians, because instead of having a gradual discovery of Christ that will allow them to enter that space and to feel wonder, they'll feel a sense of fear. And that's not what you should experience when you encounter that space. So I think in terms of strategies, for me, it's more, if the more I become like Christ, the more people around me will know Christ, and they will then question, well, how is she doing this? And how is she different to the people who around who might also call themselves Christians? What's different about this? That's often what brings people to Orthodoxy, more than trying to entice them into the church.
So that's very correct, Vanessa. Just a couple of things. Let's say that someone is a spiritual father. When he prays, or someone is a parent, when they pray for their children, spiritual or physical children, I think this goes beyond the children that they just have at the moment. It goes beyond time, it goes beyond understanding, because when you pray for your spiritual children, I think this covers everyone who wants to be your spiritual child and everyone who might be your spiritual child. If you pray to him, it's like you can absorb from his grace. So what we become influences others, as you said. If we become more like Christ, we help everyone around us. And it's not by chasing them to teach them what's right and what's wrong. These will teach them nothing, and these will not get them close to church. And we have examples from the history of our church that, like, there was this time that God wanted to destroy the planet because, and everyone on the planet, because everyone was terrible. But there were these two people that they were keeping the Holy Spirit on themselves and on the humanity. Keeping the Holy Spirit on the humanity means that this person's prayers, they cover the people that they are alive, the people that they were born before him, and the people that they will be born after him. There is no time for them. So one such person can keep the Holy Spirit on earth. If we ourselves become one of these people, then you don't need to do anything. It's like your prayers, they will help everyone who wants to find the truth. But you can't force someone who's not interested to find the truth. You will give them the truth and they will not believe in it. Like Pharaoh saw 10 plagues and still he was not convinced.
He had a hard heart. Yeah.
You can't convince me even if you convince me. That's the mentality of some people. And if they have such a mentality, you can't preach to them. And we don't want to go and preach to them, but what I mean is that God's love cannot reach in their hearts because their doors are shut.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if someone has an open door, if someone has an open heart, God can go in there, God can dwell in there, God can influence them, lead them to Orthodoxy or to wherever they need to go. And sometimes people are safer if they are a little bit more distant from the truth, if they can't handle the fullness of the truth.
Yes, yes.
So we don't know what God knows, and that's why it's safer to focus in ourselves and focus in God, focus inside us, instead of focusing on being active outside of us too much, and then not have a spiritual life ourselves, and maybe even pulling people away from the church if we try too hard.
Yes. I think one thing you said, or a lot of the things you just said then were like old moments, but one of the things you said is that we shouldn't chase after people, and that's the exact example that Christ set. He never went after the people he was trying to bring into his fold. There were so many times when people walked away from him and he let them walk away because they couldn't, the example of, they couldn't handle it. The example of the young rich prefect, when God gave him that commandment of, well then sell everything and follow me, he just couldn't do it, and God let him walk away. And he would speak to his, all of his disciples, and there's one instance in the gospel, he gives a teaching about, basically Holy Communion, this is my body and blood. And so many people said, this is too hard of a teaching, and they left him. And then he turned to the 12 disciples and said, do you want to leave as well? He never ever said, no, I'm going to chase after you and convince you. I'll convince you that it's not that bad, it's not that hard. He just let people leave when they were ready to leave, because he knew that it meant that their hearts were not ready for that truth. And like you said, God knows which of us will have hearts open and ready to receive. He knows that already. He exists beyond our idea of time. And he knows which of us will have closed hearts. And it's not up to us to go and bang on the door of every person's heart trying to get in and convince them, oh, Jesus is here to save you. That's not what we do as Orthodox Christians. And it's not the example Christ himself set. We are here to live as Christ did because we opened our hearts. And if that means people around us want to come and know Christ as well, they come to Christ through that, that's a huge blessing. But it's not us. We don't do that. And I don't think any amount of strategies or anything like that will ever achieve, bringing people to know Christ. Only if we have peace and we focus on our own road of salvation, that's when people will come to know Christ. So I completely agree with everything you said.
I want to add on what you said, which was very interesting, is that if we get Christ's example, the way he acted on earth, there was pain and there was love in his behavior, but there was no anxiety. Today we try to make people come to church and we are anxious. We transmit this anxiety. But if we were to trust in God and do what we have to do and love them, and we might feel pain for them but no anxiety, then it means that we let God work. It's not that we think that we will make them Orthodox, we will make them Christians. No, it's not us, it's God. So we do our best and God will do the rest. If God can't force their freedom, we should not either, because then we put ourselves above God. And that's not evangelizing, that's self-promoting.
Yeah.
So we need to be aware of that.
A lot of wisdom.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you
Yeah,
for having
Vanessa.
me. Thank you, Race.
Pleasure.